Hi, sixth graders. This is the second video in our What is Matter unit, and this is the reading over pages 269 and 270. We are going to stop on page 270 once we finish reading about atoms. So you can see on my screen right now that I have our text pulled up to page 269. And before we preview, I want to go ahead and pull up my notes. You should have your notes started from our first reading selection on page 265. So you've seen that today I've added my date. And we're still talking about matter. So matter is going to be our big topic, but I went ahead and put my bullet point for my subtopic. That way I'm ready to go once I find something important in my reading. So I'm going to go ahead and head back over to my text. And let's go ahead and do a preview. So I see right away I have that big blue question, what is matter made of? So I know as I'm reading, I'm going to be looking for that matching white and blue key, because that key is assigned to me that whatever sentence comes after it, that's going to be answering our big question of what is matter made of. Before I even go any further, I want to stop and think to myself, what is matter? That's a vocabulary term that's new to us that we just read about on the page 265. So I want you to take a moment, pull out that scrap sheet of paper that you've been writing your thoughts down on, or some of you have been writing it down on a new Google Doc or a different section of your notes. So wherever you've been writing down your thoughts outside of your notes, pull that out. I want you to pause the video and write down what is matter. Good. Now that you have that written down, you should remember that matter is anything that has mass and takes up space. And there are tons of examples of matter. Matter can be, well, we're made of matter. The desk is matter. Apples are matter. Everything in this universe is matter, and even air is an example of matter. So what we're going to try to be figuring out today is what is making up this matter. As I continue to scroll down on my screen, I see a big red title titled Elements, and I also see that key, so I know that my answer to my blue question is going to come rather quickly in our reading. And I see that element is a term that's highlighted, so that's going to be an important term for me to know. As I flip my page over to 270, I see that we have a section on atoms, and that atom is highlighted, so that's going to be another important term. Before I start to read, I want to stop, and since I know that elements and atoms, those are two important terms that we're going to be reading about, I want to think about my prior knowledge. What do I already know about elements and atoms? So at this time, again, you're going to pause the video, and I want you to write down, what do you already know about elements and atoms? Very good. So now that we have previewed our text, we are all set and ready to go. Our brain is nice and warmed up. Let's find out what matter is made of. What is matter? Why is one kind of matter different from another kind of matter? Around 450 BC, a Greek philosopher named Empedocles attempted to answer these questions. He proposed that all matter was made of four elements: air, earth, fire, and water. Empedocles thought that all other matter was a combination of these elements. The idea of four elements was so convincing that people believed it for more than 2,000 years. So let's stop and think about this. 450 BC, that was a long time ago. Now, I would kind of like to know, what's happening in the world around this time? Do I know anything from my history studies about anything going on at 450 BC? So what I want you to do right now, just take a moment, think about that. Anything from social studies class that you know is going on in the world around this time period. And if you can think of anything, or if you want to take a moment to research this on your notebook real quick, see what's going on in the world, that would be great, because then we can put this into context from what we already know. So now that you've had some time to think about what might have happened around 450 BC, let's move on to see how the idea of these elements continue to change throughout history. So in our reading, elements. In the late 1600s, experiments by early chemists began to show that matter was made up of many more than 4 elements. Scientists know that all matter in the universe is made of more than 100 different substances called elements. An element is a substance that cannot be broken down into any other substances by chemical or physical means. Elements are the simplest substances. Each element can be identified by its specific physical and chemical properties. You may already be familiar with some elements such as aluminum or tin. Elements are represented by 1 or 2 letter symbols such as C for carbon, O for oxygen, and Ca for calcium. So let's stop and talk about this paragraph. Look at how long it took. We went from 450 BC to finally in the late 1600s when we had some early chemists or scientists who studied chemistry doing some experiments on matter and proving that it was made up of more than 4 elements. And we see that this key here, scientists know that all matter in the universe is made of more than 100 different substances called elements. Now, if we look at the definition element here, we can go ahead and we know that we need to get this into our notes. So let's go over to our notes here, and we can add elements. And it said an element is, or elements are substances that can't be broken down into any other substances. Now I see that word substance, and we talked about that in our last section. So a substance is a single kind of matter that is pure or has a specific composition. So now we know that an element is an example of a substance. It can't be broken down into any other substances. So our examples that we had, aluminum or tin. Now in class, we are going to explore many different examples of elements. These are just 2 of many different ones. So aluminum, no matter what we do to aluminum, we can't break it down to make it into any other substances. No matter how far we take aluminum down to its basic piece, it's always going to be aluminum. Think of a gold necklace. Gold is an element. If you were to take a gold necklace and we were able to cut it in half and cut it in half over and over and over and over again, the basic piece that we would still come down to is still gold. That's how we know that it's an element. It can't be broken down into any other substances. So say we take a look at our netbook. Our netbook would not be an example of an element because if we broke it down, well, a netbook is made up of plastic and metal and a whole bunch of different substances put together. So that's why our netbook would not be an example of an element. We'll talk more about the examples of elements and what are elements in class. This is just a good start for you. So if you need to get more time to get your notes down, go ahead and pause and then come back to the movie when you're ready. Now, looking back at our element selection here, I see that it says scientists know that all matter in the universe is made of more than 100 different substances called elements. So all of the matter in the universe is made up of elements. That is very, very important because it tells us how elements are related to matter. Scientists know all matter is made of 100 different elements. Good. Now if we go back to our reading, I think that covers all of the important pieces in this last section. So let's move on to page 270. Atoms. Imagine tearing a piece of aluminum foil in half over and over again. Sounds like what I was just talking about, right? Would you reach a point where you had the smallest possible piece of aluminum? The answer is yes. The particle theory of matter explains that all matter is made of atoms. An atom is the basic particle from which all elements are made. An atom has a positively charged center or nucleus containing smaller particles. The nucleus is surrounded by a cloud of negative charge. The elements have different properties because their atoms are different. So let's stop and take a look at this last piece here. And I see that atom is highlighted. So I know that that's probably a good clue. This is an important term for me to know. And it says that an atom is the basic particle from which all elements are made. So let's go back to our notes. And we want to take our bullet point and decrease the indent. Atom, the basic particle from which all elements are made. Good. And if we go back to our reading, we see that elements have different properties because their atoms are different. So we're going to tab that over and put elements have different properties because their atoms are different. So if we were to take that piece of aluminum and cut it in half and cut it in half as far as we possibly could, the smallest piece of that aluminum that we're going to come to is an aluminum atom. And that aluminum atom is going to be totally different from our gold atom, which makes aluminum have different properties than our gold necklace. So that is just a brief intro to elements and atoms and how they relate to matter. We are going to be discussing this way more in depth in class, and I have a lot of activities for us to be doing, but these are the notes that I expect you to have ready to go for class. And thank you for listening and participating in the notes section.